The House will please come to order. Good morning, colleagues. Welcome to the 32nd day of our general session, Friday, April 2nd. And we're meeting at our appointed time. Please call the roll.
Convening roll for the 32nd day, Friday, April 2nd, 2021. Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Burt.
Here.
Oh, Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner.
Here.
Gray. Greer. Hellenam. Haroldson. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kinner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Mhm. Newsom. Nicholas. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermueller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stiff. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters.
Here.
Washit. Western. Worf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Brown. Nicholas. Excused. $58 present, 2 excused.
Thank you very much. So members, we're going to have our prayer with Pastor Zach. So if you'd all rise. First, I want to inform the body, as a body, we're a family and we celebrate together and we mourn together. And this morning, and some of you know this morning I received a text. Lorraine May Nyman passed away peacefully, surrounded by her family at 4:50 a.m. That's the mother of our colleague Chip Nyman. He made it home to see her. Actually, he made it to the hospital to see her. So he's confident she's resting with her Lord on Easter weekend, on Good Friday. And so let's just take a moment to hold up the Nyman family and their community with our prayers and our support. And then the pastor will, at the appropriate time, come in and pray on behalf of the House of Representatives. So just a moment, if you would, please.
As we gather together, there are moments in our life just like this where our hearts weigh heavy. We lift up the Nyman family as they grieve in these moments. May we surround them and be present with them. And it's in these moments that we celebrate a life well lived. Each of these bringing different colors into our life, into this world, painting a picture. And as our prayer this morning, I want to share with you a poem called Crayon the World. My daughter says, "Daddy, pick up a crayon and crayon the world." And I look into her eyes, but she looks through me. She carefully places a color in her tiny fingers and crayons my heart. Pick up a color and crayon the world. Squeeze your fingers around the simple wax stick and let its playful pigments bring life to everything. Transform the gloomy and gray, make it bold and brilliant display. Crayon everything that's dull and drab and dreary. Dare to crayon the dark places and the frightening faces. Crayon them until they spring with life. Push beyond the surface of things. Crayon beauty into everything. Grace is a box of Crayola crayons. Your life is part of a bigger plan. Pick up your crayon and share this love. The hopeless, the broken, the lonely, the left out, the lost. Those that we grieve alongside today. May we pick up our crayon. Don't stop. Pick up a color and crayon this world. May we hear these words. May we come together. May we surround each other. And may we crayon this world as we grieve together, as we work together, as we celebrate together. We pray these things in your name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible. Thank you, Pastor Zach. And folks, Pastor Zach will be joining us next week too, as we finish out our session of the 66th Wyoming Legislature. So thank you. So glad your family was here with us yesterday. Appreciate that. So members, thank you for your thoughts and for the Nyman family and certainly a transition. I don't know, Mrs. Nyman was here, and I remember standing right over here on the 12th of January when her baby boy was sworn in. And she was a proud mama. And I'm so glad you got to be there with her. So anyway, all right, so we're going to do something celebratory now. We mourn together, but we're going to celebrate together. So folks, as you know, there's a lot of people, and for the listening and viewing world and those that might be in the gallery, there's some folks here. It's wonderful. It takes a lot of other folks to do the work that we do. It takes our staff, it takes our session staff, who won't be here next week, most of them. So we want to make sure we appreciate them today. So if we could have all of our staff come to the front of the House chamber, please. Let's welcome them to the House chamber. All right. So I'm just going to go through the names because not everybody serves on every committee, so you may not cross paths with these folks. So I just want everybody to know all the different folks who have done the work. So I'm going to start with our committee secretaries. We all know that the committee work is the heart of what legislative work is. We come to the floor, those good ideas have already been to committee. So first, and I'll try to get through them all and name their committees, and then we'll give them all a big round of applause. So first, we have Kay Benning, who does judiciary. Kay, make sure you know, everybody knows who you are, because not everybody will know. We have Mary Lee Dixon for appropriations. Bonnie Cruz, revenue and labor. Education and transportation, Diana Hicksenbaugh. Agriculture and mineral, Carol Clark. And finally, travel and corporations, Barr Boston. Thank you very much. And then, even though we were supposed to be almost completely, electronic, the chief clerk and I had some discussions about this. Paper bills, thank you very much. We have folks that take care of those things. So we have 3 folks that kind of taking care of the papers, getting us the materials we need, help out in all those other ways. So we have our copy center clerk, Sandy Dent, our support clerks, Patty Menengi and Carol Nicolarson. So thank you, ladies. And if you're feeling particularly vulnerable right now, is because our Sergeant of Arms, Rick Kessler, Dorman and Dorman 1 and Dorman 2, George and Ed are all at the front of the room. Give it up. And of course, the folks that have taken care of us, and a lot of it has been our appetites, morning and afternoon, Chris Birdwell and Susan Long. Thank you, ladies. All right, so there's another group of folks, and I'm going to kind of divide them into 2 folks, and some of them sit up here and some of them are in other places doing, you probably haven't even seen some of these folks. So I'm going to start with the folks you you don't see very often. So Chris Carlson sits over here behind the big screen, right in the corner, right here. And even further out of the way, in the back of the back, there is a window in the office, but that's about it. We'll get them both here. Yeah, you've never seen these people before. Katie Talbot and Gwen Vines. Where's Charlene? Oh, Charlene, right down here. Charlene's, and so those of you that are wanting your bills to be signed in and delivered back and forth, be nice to Charlene. She's delivering your bills for signatures. And then the 2 folks one that keeps at least my end of the house, me organized, is Pam Landry. And I hope that you've all got to meet her. She's in that office taking care of things when we're out here doing other work. So Pam, thank you so much. I've got everybody? I've got everybody but you and you 2, right? All right. And now the voice of the Wyoming House of Representatives, Mr. John Ershaw. And finally, this is probably one of the most challenging things in my marriage in the last 3 months, is my wife says I spend more time visiting with Chief Clerk Harding than I do her. But my wife did understand, and she sent to Chief a cup. Grab your cup there, Chief. And the cup, what does the cup say, Chief?
Chief of Chaos Coordinator.
Give it up for the Chief Clerk. All right, so we have a tradition in this body and we're gonna just, the last Friday, we're probably gonna be together as the 66th. With most of the members, as you see, there's several on the Zoom, as the former speaker would say, on the Zoom. So we're just gonna do this old school style. So Chairman of Revenues, Chairman Harshman, what would you say at this point of the day? All right. All right, members, let's come back to order. Thank you very much for lifting up our colleague and his family, Representative Nyman and his family, the Nyman family. And thank you for celebrating the folks that help us get the work we do on behalf of the Wyoming citizens done well. So we have a privilege of the floor. If you'll turn your attention to the front of the chamber, Representative Duncan,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege of the floor.
please proceed.
Thank you. I would love for everyone to point your attention to the South Gallery. We have an incredible family here. I'm a little biased. They are the daughter and daughter-in-law and the grandkids of my business partner for my business. We have Karen Daly and her two kids. We have Max and Vivian. And then we have Jill Tregemba and her two kids. We have Cammie and Cole, and they're all here from Goshen County.
Well, it is wonderful to have you here joining us today. We're so glad. Enjoy your day, your Good Friday. Must be a day off of school and things. Yeah, so wonderful. We're glad you're here. All right, members, to inform the members that the House of Representatives and myself as Speaker has received the letter from the governor regarding his actions on the supplemental budget. And later on today, we'll ask our Chairman of Appropriations just give us a quick overview of that. And then we can, as throughout the day, as you're interacting with each other, you can consider whether there's something in there that the body may want to continue a discussion on. So it is available to you, of course. It was emailed to you. And it's, of course, available to the broader public on the legislative website. So with that, messages from the Senate or Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of April 1st, 2021 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representatives Harrelson and Provenza.
Thank you. Messages from the Senate.
Message 394. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 150, State Budgeting and Expenditure Authority. The Senate adopted the Joint Conference Committee Number 1 report on the bill listed above by the vote indicated. Ayes 29, noes 1. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 397. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 121, State Funded Capital Construction. The Senate adopted the Joint Conference Committee Number 1 report on the bill listed above with the vote indicated. Ayes 25, noes 5. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 398. Mr. Speaker, Senate File 75, Protective Orders Amendments. The Senate failed to concur on House amendments to the bill listed above by the vote indicated. Noes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 399. Mr. Speaker, the Senate did concur on House amendments to the bill listed below by the vote indicated. Senate File 58, Wyoming Investment in Nursing Funding. Ayes 27, noes 2, excused 1. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 400. Mr. Speaker, Senate File 87, Voyeurism Amendments. The Senate adopted the Joint Conference Committee Number 1 report on the bill listed above by the vote indicated. Ayes 24, noes 5, excused 1. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 401. Mr. Speaker, the Senate appointed Senate conferees to meet with the Light Committee Number 1 from the House on amendments to Senate File 75. The Senate conferees are Senator Landon, Chairman, Senator Kolb, Senator Nethercott. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Thank you very much. So members, we're at that order of business of bills on second reading. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 38.
Senate File 38, sponsored by Blockchain, Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, an act relating to corporations.
We do have amendments. Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'd like to move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 38 and ask for your favorable consideration. So yesterday we had this discussion about these organizations, and they're basically LLCs, and so they would fall under the fee structure for an LLC. And I just think that that's too little of a filing fee. And whether I picked the right filing fee or not, I'm not sure, but I chose $1,000. And so that's basically it. And then you can see in Romanet 2 for amending the Articles of Organization, a filing fee of $150, and the rest is just kind of language. So hopefully you will favorably consider my amendment.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Representative Stiff.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to divide the amendment if I could.
Okay, your divisions?
Division 1, I guess, is lines 14 and 15, which relates to the filing fee for amending the Articles of Organization. And then the rest of the other division is everything else.
Okay, so Division 1 is the lines 14 and 15, and the remainder of the amendment is Division 2. Is that accurate?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, you divide, you can begin with whichever division you'd like.
So I guess we've called Division 1 lines 14 and 15, and this relates to the $150 fee for amending your Articles of Organization. I guess I would ask for a no vote on that, only because the current draft of this requires lots of amendments. It says anytime you do anything with the organization, other parts of the bill require lots of amendments to Articles of Organization, which is kind of unusual. Usually when you set up an LLC, you don't have a lot of amendments to the Articles of Organization. So the $150 itself is not the problem. What I think is the problem is the interplay of this 150 with the fact that this setup is going to sort of generate a lot more amendments than typical.
Representative Summers, first time Division 1.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I would agree. I think after the explanation that I would agree to vote no on that piece of that. So.
Any other discussion, Division 1? Chairman Olson.
Well, Mr. Speaker, so I don't know if the idea is to generate money for the state of Wyoming, I would encourage a yes vote on this one. The idea of it being written in code is that your operating agreement or your articles even, your operating agreement is what's going to be dynamic, and it's going to be living, and it's going to be changing through the code a lot. I don't know that your articles are going to change that much that you amend with the state, because those are really basic principles. You're only going to outline so many, but the existing fee is only $50 on an LLC. I don't know that 150 is too bad. Honestly, I'd probably vote aye on this one.
Thank you. Any of the members, first time Division 1? First time Division 1. First time Division 1, second time Division 1, second time Representative Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And I want to make this clear that this fee structure is simply for these organizations and does not involve other LLCs. So it's simply for these organizations. And so vote your conscience on this division.
Second time. The divider want to speak to this? Representative Stiff? second time?
Mr. Speaker, no, I just think just no vote on Division 1.
All right, members, we're voting on Division 1, second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 38. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The division is adopted. Division 2. Representative Stiff.
Mr. Speaker, on and in favor of Division 2.
Further discussion on Division 2. Representative Olson.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I think it's a little steep. If you file an LLC, a traditional LLC, any other LLC, it's $100. And if you do it online, you pay an extra $2. So it's $102. Now we're saying if you want to create the exact same company, but you want your operating agreement to be in code instead of on paper, we're going to charge $1,000. I just did a quick search, looked at some other states. I think the highest state I saw for any LLC filing is $350. So I agree that there's nothing wrong with if we want to charge more for this unique LLC to make it worth it for the state of Wyoming. I don't have a problem with that. I just think 1,000 is just a little steep. Maybe somewhere between 250 and 500 would be more in line with what other states charge for LLCs in general, but 1,000's a little aggressive.
Thank you. Any other member first time? Division 2, Representative Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And, this is a new enterprise and a new opportunity. And I just think that let's be real. Let's get some money out of this deal. So on and in favor of the $1,000.
Chairman Zwanitzer, first time, Division 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Also on in favor of Division 2. And I think the key point for people to know is on line 11 when it says a foreign decentralized, which means, well, any other state is what foreign is. But if they decide to headquarter and be in Wyoming, they don't have to pay this fee.
Further discussion, second time, seeing none. Members, we're voting on Division 2, second reading amendment number 1, Senate File 38. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The division is adopted. Senate File 38 having been read having two more amendments. Representative Stiff.
Mr. Speaker, I would move second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 38 and ask for your favorable consideration. This relates to a change, I believe, on pages 12 and the top of 13. And the only purpose of this amendment is to avoid conflict about what this bill means. If this bill becomes statute, we don't want people to argue about what it means. So your membership interests, your voting rights, all of that's normally going to be set forth in your operating agreement. And people really should, when they do these, 95, 98% of the time, they're going to have an operating agreement that spells it all out. But this particular provision of the bill deals with what happens if you forget, what happens if you don't adopt an operating agreement, what's the default? And this just says, this amendment, the effect of this amendment just says, if you don't get around to having an operating agreement at all, then all of the members each get one membership interest and everyone has an equal share. Now, that's normally not going to be what you want, right? Normally, you're not going to want to have everyone have an equal share. Okay. But that's just that we just have a default in case you screwed up and didn't have an operating agreement, right? The current language says your membership interest is proportional to the value of the digital assets that you contribute. And it seems like that is rife with problems because one, if you contribute a few lines of code, how much is that worth? I wrote 40 lines of code, but you wrote 400 lines of code. Does that mean you get 10 times as much interest as I do? What does that mean? So I'm just deleting that. If someone in their operating agreement wants to say, yes, your membership interest is going to be proportional to the digital assets that you contribute, and they want to spell out exactly what that means, whether that's contributing cryptocurrency or whether that's contributing software code, they can do that and they should. But this just says, if you don't, the default will just be everyone is treated equally in the organization as a default on and for.
Thank you. Chairman Greer, second reading amendment number 2.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So folks, when you look at our LLC laws, so this is a supplement to it, which is sort of an add-on. The interesting thing about our LLC laws is there are sections and sections of what happens when you don't have an operating agreement. Okay, so you have an operating agreement as people are in business together, they're in an enterprise together, you sit down, you discuss, this is how we are going to relate to one another. This is how we're going to treat our capital. This is how we're going to either perform services, what we're going to add to it, how we're going to divide the profits, what we're going to do on dissolution, all these things. That all goes into an operating agreement when people sit down and have that discussion. But that doesn't always happen. I've seen hundreds, probably thousands, if I think about all those years of LLCs where somebody just filed it. You know, we talked about them online, they filed, they got articles of organization, they make their tax election, boom, they're off and running. No operating agreement, happens all the time. Then people get sideways, right? I mean, I know you all like to agree with me, but we don't always agree. So this happens with people. So that's what our LLC statute says. Okay, what do we do when we don't have this covered in the operating agreement? And so to me, this section was a policy decision. It was worked through by the committee this summer. It said, when we don't have something in writing, or in this case, is, you know, part of the smart contracts and all this good stuff with DAOs, this is what we default to give a clear statutory understanding. You know, I mean, any of you have been involved in a buy-sell agreement, right? Buy-sell agreement's there for what purpose? In case everything goes really wrong. So I think, you know, even though this, if you pull this out, it's still going to be a good law. But in my mind, as I look at what we do as policymakers, what we want to do is bring certainty to people, in particular in business. Is extremely important that we have an environment that brings certainty. That's why people want to come to Wyoming. People don't necessarily hate regulation. What they hate is regulatory uncertainty. So I said, Bill's gonna be good if you vote aye, but I still think it's a good policy to leave it in. Thank you.
Any other member for their first time? We're on first time, second reading amendment number 2. First time, second time to the sponsor.
Mr. Speaker, I think all the comments from the representative from District 27 are accurate. My goal here is just by removing the Romanet 2 that divvies it up by digital assets and keeping Romanet 3, which just makes it everyone's equal. The point here really is just to avoid a conflict. So you know, I think it's simpler and less likely to lead to litigation if we adopt this amendment. On and for.
Thank you very much, members. We're voting on second reading amendment number 2. Senate File 38. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. All those in favor, please stand. We're going to have to have a little more commitment out of this crowd, one way or the other. All right, all those opposed? All right, the amendment has failed. I think there was only, yeah, thank you. 12 and the rest. Next amendment, the amendment has not been adopted. Second amendment number 3, Representative Stiff.
Mr. Speaker, I move second reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 38 and ask for your favorable consideration. The current draft says that if you want to withdraw from one of these decentralized autonomous organizations, you have to have an affirmative vote of a majority of the members. But think about the practicalities of that. We want this to be fast moving. We want this to be modern. So your members might be 20 somethings that are spread around. You know, one might be in Cheyenne and another one might be in Kuala Lumpur and the other person is in Tallinn, Estonia, and they're all doing this 24/7 coding hackathon and they're doing this thing. It's a great project. But let's imagine that one of them decides he wants to get out, like you don't like the direction this organization is going. You really disagree because they are suddenly doing something you disagree with and you want to get out. Well, right now you have to get an affirmative, you can't get out unless there's an affirmative vote of a majority of these people who never actually meet each other. So that's, you get stuck, right? So What this amendment would do is say that you can withdraw, and the way you withdraw is just by sending a notice of withdrawal to the registered agent, because there has to be a registered agent with a physical address in Wyoming. So nice and clear way to withdraw. The question then is, well, what happens to your ownership interest? I think it's a little unfair for you just to completely lose whatever you've put into it. So this just says you lose, if you withdraw, you've made a statement that you withdraw, you can tell the public you're not affiliated with this organization, you don't have any voting rights anymore. But if you have some equity stake, you don't necessarily lose whatever money or value you have in it. Now, importantly, in this amendment, it says that the operating agreement, articles of organization, or smart contracts can provide otherwise. So someone could have an operating agreement that says, hey, if you withdraw, you lose all of your equity interest. And that's okay, but that would be part of what you agree to if you sign up for that. This provides the default situation of if there's not a provision, if you haven't agreed upon how you get out, this provides the default that you can get out just by sending notice to the registered agent.
Thank you. Chairman Flitner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to ask the bringer of the amendment, where is Tallinn, Estonia?
Any other points of information needed? Chair. Representative Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Or Mr. Speaker, I am on and for this amendment. And as the good chairman of Minerals gave testimony on the prior amendment, people go into these without a clear exit plan. I've done business consulting and had many arbitrations on how do we get out. Very easy to get in, harder to get out. And if you don't anticipate that at the starting of one of these, it can turn into a real train wreck. So I think this is a really good way to tell people if they don't have it in their operating agreement, how they can get out. This is very clear and fair. Thanks.
Majority Floor Leader Summers, first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So just to the bringer, explain to me what the current LLC statutes say. Is it silent with respect to this piece, or does it put this same thing in place? Because basically we're creating a different type of LLC. So is there two standards? And because this one's, and explain to me why we'd have a difference if there is a difference. Thank you.
Chairman Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a great amendment. I'd vote aye. And for exactly the question that was just asked, because in our existing LLC law, the LLC law would be less restrictive than the operating agreement. And so I think by deleting this out, I think you're actually going to be square with what we would do under a traditional LLC. We don't have a statute that places that restriction on withdrawal. And so it would be more in line with what we do with our LLCs right now. And the bringer of the amendment is 100% spot on. If you want to have this restriction in your company, you can put it in your operating agreement. So there's no need for the statute to be this restrictive, because if you want to be more restrictive, you just do that in your operating agreement. So I think it would be, again, it's right in line with how we already do LLC law. So I'd vote aye.
Any other member, first time? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thanks. I guess just a question after that last explanation. So how these are different, when you're arguably different, is you're asking a group of people who may not know each other, be affiliated, to provide input and work. And so I guess my question comes is, you have expectations on someone to contribute and they don't. And they say, well, I get out of the organization, but I still keep my ownership interest. Everybody else is out there working their tail off, bringing the organization, hopefully bringing in money. You're the weak link. You're just like, I'm out. I don't care about my voting rights, but you're holding that equity. And maybe it's just under the current law, I don't know, but how long does your ownership interest last once you pull out of an LLC? And are there any difference in this? Because from what I understand, these LLCs are really trying to connect and network people and go rapidly, and you're getting paid in some form for the work you put in. If you're not putting in any work, why and how long should you keep your ownership interest? Assuming they may have actually tried to push you out as well.
Other members, first time. Additional members, first time, third reading amendment, or second reading amendment number 3. First time, second time to the sponsor, Representative Stiff.
Mr. Speaker, let me try to sort of address the questions to make this informative or productive. So by rejecting the second reading amendment, fortunately, you've taken care of the slacker problem, because if it's all digital assets, then if you're the slacker, then your ownership interest goes down because you're slacking, right? You're not writing code the way everybody else is. So I think that takes care of that. With respect to the question from the representative from District 20, the short answer is I don't know. I apologize. Should have done my research better. What I do know is that there are 3 Wyoming Supreme Court cases involving the same very unhappy minority member of an LLC who formed an internet startup company and then tried to get out. And they had to make 3 trips to the Supreme Court. And the issue was whether he could force a buyout. Turns out he can't. So being a minority member is really not a great thing. The current law, thank you. Right now, the events causing a dissociation of a member include a notice from the person's express will to withdraw as a member, an event stated in the operating agreement causing the person's dissociation, the person is expelled as a member pursuant to the operating agreement, the pursuant is expelled as a member by the unanimous consent of the other members if it is unlawful to carry on the company's activities with the person as a member. So I would say that this amendment does create a slightly different standard, because with the only difference being this getting expelled because it's unlawful for you to continue in the organization, which is kind of an odd phrase. I'm not aware of a circumstance where that's actually been used, but in current law, you can get out by giving your notice that you want to get out. And so this provision creates the same kind of getting out by notice. So the danger, I think, is if we keep the current bill draft language, we'll have a very different standard, because in a normal LLC, you can get out by sending in your notice that you want to get out. But the current draft says you can only get out by an affirmative vote of a majority of people that you don't know. So I think on balance, I think this amendment works, and hope that answers the questions. On and for.
Thank you. Members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 3, Senate File 38. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Senate File 38 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 68.
Senate File 68, sponsored by Senator Ellis. Absenteeism in public schools, an act relating to education.
Thank you. There is an amendment. Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'd like to move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 68 and ask for your favorable consideration. And so, you'd assume that pre-approved meant district pre-approved in that set of statutes, but it just wasn't clear. So who's pre-approving? Is it the parent? Is it the district? And then, so this will just make it clear that it's pre-approved by the district. So on in support of the amendment.
Discussion on the amendment, Seeing none, all those in favor of second reading amendment number 1, Senate File 68, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Senate File 68 having been read 2 separate times. Question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, so ordered. Next, Senate File 76.
Senate File 76, sponsored by Senator Dockstader. Broadband Development Program amendments, an act relating to the Broadband Development Program.
Senate File 76 having received the affirmative vote of Senate File 76 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 112.
Senate File 112, sponsored by Senator Landon, insurance discounts for accidents, prevention training, and act relating to motor vehicles insurance.
Senate File 112, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next Senate File 121.
Senate File 121, sponsored by Senator Perkins, state funds, investments, and distributions, and act relating to public funds.
We have an amendment. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 121 and ask for favorable consideration. So we talked yesterday about this 1% severance distribution and had this distribution in the general fund and some in the schools. And the real compromise here, because that's what I'm into, is putting this into the legislative stabilization reserve account, 1/2 of this distribution into LISRA, and then 1/2 into the sub account, the legislative deficit control account that the legislature created 2 years ago and about 2 months ago. And that distribution can be invested. And it's segregated, so it will be very difficult to pull out, which is what the Senate is concerned about, or what the other body is concerned about. And so you get this nice balance where we're not locking it up forever, but where there are some protections to just pulling it out. And ultimately, LISRA is the backstop for education. So it's basically going to backstop education, which I think is where we want to be with our deficits right now. So ask for favorable consideration.
Thank you. Members, first time, Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And on mildly against the amendment, I like the way I did it better, frankly, obviously, which was 2/3 to the general fund and 1/3 to the school foundation program. I like the fact that this stays liquid. I would have rather seen it go to the LISRA. One question I would have for the good bringer is there any money currently in this coffee can? And what does it take? Is it by further legislative authorization to pull it out of the coffee can? And so anyway, mildly against, have a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Yen, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I know the legislative deficit control account is a sub-account of the LISRA. So then I guess my question is, what's the difference between splitting it between the LISRA and the legislative deficit control account versus just putting it all in the LISRA? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Members, first time, Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So against the amendment, it's my understanding there is no money in the empty coffee can currently known as the deficit control account. And maybe on third reading, we can just take that coffee can out and not fill it, because it's, if you visualize it, it's basically a coffee can inside of a larger coffee can. And there's no reason to fund it anymore. And we probably, well, there's no reason to have ever funded it or have it, in my opinion. I'm not sure actually when it went in, but I think our good appropriations committee has done the right thing by not putting any money, even though it does exist in statute.
Thank you. Other members, Representative Henderson, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question goes to the deficit control account and the, I guess, the underlying assumption related to deficits. I mean, are you assuming we're always going to have a deficit? So you want to make sure that that balance is there in your percentages or not? And then, I mean, isn't that the purpose of the LISRA?
Any other member for the first time, Representative Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against, and mainly the reason is I appreciate my good seatmate pulled open the Green Book and actually went and looked this up. I was trying to figure out what the deficit control account even really was. And as we were reading in it, the only differentiation between this and the LISRA is the deficit control account is specifically, it hand ties the money that's in that account to only appropriations coming out of this body. So the notion that it's going to be a backstop for education is only if we say it's a backstop for education and we appropriate it that way. So really what we're doing with this particular amendment, I really like the half and half. I think this dicing things up 1/3, 2/3, I think this is where we start getting goofy and people start having some understanding of where these flows of money go to. So I like the half and half. But why not just put it all in the LISRA? I think this idea of splitting this up, and as the good chairman of corporations just said, we literally have a big coffee can, and then we're going to take, and we have an empty coffee can inside that little coffee can, and we're going to start taking some of the money in the big coffee can and shoving it in the little one to make us feel good. And I don't know about the warm fuzzies that gives me. So we have literally absolutely nothing in this account right now, and there's a reason for that. And I'm not sure that appropriating money into this just to make sure that we can appropriate money out of this as opposed to it being an actual backstop is the right way. So on and against. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Obermuller, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against, part of the concept of the Summers amendment was to bring clarity as to where it's going. Nobody really understands what this sub-account to the sub-account is. I don't know what it is. Never have understood it. Why create more confusion with this amendment? So on and against.
Any of the members first time? Members first time? Members first time to second time? Second time to the sponsor, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's not confusion, it's good budgeting. And Mr. Speaker, what you do when you create a sub account is and the whole point of these, it's a very easy sort of tagline saying there's too many coffee cans. And while there's an element of truth to it, it's not the complete story. When you create coffee cans, you create a way of segregating funds so that they don't get expended wastefully. It's one technique of a way to do that. And people can come back and say it's non-transparent. No, it's the opposite. It's trying to increase transparency rather than putting into one account, which becomes a slush fund, and everybody just writes a budget amendment or a bill to bring a distribution out of a slush fund. So this is good budgeting. And the thought was the reason there's no money right there right now is because 2 years ago, the SIPA distribution started in fiscal year 2021, which we're coming up on, right? So there will be money there starting in the summer. And so the thought process was that while we're in this period of a deficit, that we're going to segregate a portion of the SIPA distribution, which, look, we're in a deficit period. We can't spend as much on these discretionary building projects. We're going to take a portion of the SIPA distribution and we're going to put it into a sub account within LISRA. We're going to call it the deficit control account so it's more protected. Now, if someone writes an amendment or a bill and they say we're going to take $1 million out of the deficit control account, that doesn't look as good as taken out of the stabilization reserve account, which happens all the time. Part of life is perception. It is part of life. And creating a sub account that is called the deficit control account and appropriating it to something that is not a deficit doesn't look good. And that was the concept. And the other body went along with it, frankly. I mean, originally we were going to put that SIPA distribution into schools and they weren't they weren't agreeable to that. Ultimately, if this bill is going to get through on concurrence, I think this is the only way we're going to end up at this point if we're going to keep these dollars liquid. So, I mean, you guys can talk about something on planet Jupiter or whatever, but this is how we get it to where it can get through and we can keep it liquid. Now, maybe it could be 100% into LISRA, but I think 50% into the control account is the way to go. And it's just, it's just reality of the differences between the two bodies. And if we want to keep this liquid, we can't put it into the general fund. It's just not, it's not acceptable. So anyway, I would urge an aye vote. The difference, there are a lot of questions on that. The difference is that this is clearly being allocated for our deficits. Okay. Whereas LISRA, frankly, there's been debate even between me and the chairman of minerals on this floor and a lot of other people about what is the function of LISRA. I think right now in periods of deficit, it is a backstop as well. Many people in this chamber do not think that. The deficit control account, though, I think clearly is a backstop. And that was the thought behind having a distribution there. And I think we should have more distributions there. And if we want to keep these funds liquid, I think this is a way to do it in that both sides can be very happy about. I urge an aye vote on the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we're voting on second reading, amendment number 1, Senate File 121. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. Senate File 121, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 122.
Senate File 122, sponsored by Senator Boner. Wyoming Agriculture Authority, an act relating to agriculture and livestock.
We have an amendment. Representative Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is mostly a technical amendment. In the standing committee amendment, they had the dates wrong to sunset so we put a sunset clause in to sunset the whole thing. They had the dates wrong that sunsetted the thing before it started. So it was just a technical before the whole thing started. And then the last one was an error in a technical error that pushed the date or sunset. Didn't let the board have their funding long enough to 2023 to reach the sunset. So
Discussion. I don't even know that I should recognize Chairman Nicholas at this point. Chairman Nicholas.
So on and against the amendment, I thought it was pretty clever that we sunset it before it started.
Any other member, any other member for their first time? First time. All right. Members, we are voting on second reading, member on to Senate File 122. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Second reading, amendment number 1, Senate File 122 has been adopted. Senate File 122 have been read 2 separate times. Question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 127.
Senate File 127, sponsored by Senator Kinsky. Wyoming Learn While You Earn Program, an act relating to education.
We do have amendments. Majority Leader Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'd like to move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 127. And so as I went through this bill, one of my biggest concerns in it, and I'm a co-sponsor and I like the bill, but a concern I had is how the money that may be distributed out to community colleges. So if there's a money put to it in the budget or an appropriation that we'd have in this bill, how does it go out if there's not enough money to meet the demand? And there is a promulgating rules section, but I just felt that this piece of it needed to be tightened up and make sure at least they draft rules on this. And so this simply just says that the rules promulgated pursuant to this section shall at a minimum provide a process or procedure by which funds shall be equitably provided to the colleges in the event the demand on the program is greater than available funding. So I urge your support.
Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While I agree with the intent, I start to question about the equitability portion of this because the cost of living and the cost of pay is going to be drastically different in this community college district than that maybe up in the northern part of the state. And so if we say equitably, I want to make sure that we're talking about those types of things with the cost of living changes and stuff like that, because there may be a greater demand in one locale than in the other. But if we're starting to bifurcate that level of funding, it almost seems to me like we should just make sure that there's enough funding for this program instead of cutting pay to these employers that are looking at doing this and the assistance with this. I really like this program, and I think the representative up in the northern part of the state who brought this last year, I think that's a great idea, but maybe we should just fund it more and not have to worry about the demand and the equitability portion of making sure it gets done.
Other members first time, other members first time. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question for the bringer of the amendment. Are these kids going to count in concurrent enrollment? Is that the idea with the community colleges? And thank you, Miss.
Thank you. Any other member first time? We're on first time. First time to second time. Second time, Majority Floor Leader Summers, bring it home.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And so, equitably isn't defined here, so I think that would be up to the commission to define. Ultimately, to me, it's if we're short of money, yeah, I'd love to fund everything fully, right? Well, we can't always do that. So how do we divide it up? And to the good chair of revenue and his question, he sat in the same meeting that I did, and we heard that answer, and I can't remember it. To be honest, but I don't think they are. I think it's a different program. That question was asked and answered, but I don't remember. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we're voting on second reading amendment number 1, Senate File 127. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. We have another second reading amendment, number 2, Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'd like to move second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 127. And the decision, I'll just say the decision will be up to you. So what I promised you in committee, we pulled out the $1 million appropriation because we didn't have time really to get it to Appropriations Committee and do a re-referral. So what I did when we brought this standing committee amendment, as I said, I would bring this option back to the body, whether you wanted to put in the $1 million appropriation that was in that for this program. So this would, you can see the language is just deleting the standing committee amendment. It's deleting just that portion of the standing committee amendment that dealt with the appropriation. So if you vote aye on this amendment, you will put $1 million back into this program. If you vote no, there won't be any funding in the program. So that's your options. Thank you.
Any member first time, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment. I think this is a fantastic program. I think we have employers that are looking to do this. And I think if we're going to create a program and we have employers that are ready to do this, this is the perfect execution of a public-private partnership. We hear about them constantly. We hear about this idea that we need to have these public-private partnerships get engaged. And here we actually have them where we're going to create homegrown kids that are going to stay in these jobs and do these career technical opportunities. And in order for us to be able to do that, we're going to have some level of funding. So on in favor of the amendment, I think this is a fantastic amendment. I do have one question, and I see the bringer of the amendment's already sat back down, but I noticed that there's a third reading amendment that looks eerily similar. And so I'm just trying to find out if there's a reason why we have it second and third reading, and maybe it's just to have the discussion more, but thank you.
Other members for their first time, first time going second time to the sponsor.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Because I'd already submitted it, the third reading amendment has to stand there and sit there. I did it in second reading to not complicate a third reading. So I decided to bring it back into second reading, and then obviously if it goes to third, I'll withdraw that amendment.
Members, and I'm going to do something a little out of order because I did not recognize Representative Fortner as I was going through that first time, second time. So Representative Fortner, if you'd like to make a final comment on this, I'm going to go out of order, but it's out of order, but I want you to be, and I apologize to you, Representative Fortner. Please proceed with comments on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My comment is, I'm for this type of program, but why in the world is the taxpayer going to pay for it? Why aren't the employers, when they come to these people, these trainees, why aren't they paying that sum? Why in the world are we getting in the way the enterprise where people actually need these. I was in one of these programs myself when I first got into the welding field, and it worked really well. The employer, he paid, I think 2/3 of the salary to the guy that he's putting in the field. I'm not for government intervening and getting in the way of this type of program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So members, I do apologize first to Representative Fortner and to the body that was out of, it was on me. And I apologize. So members, we are going to vote now on second reading, amendment number 2 to Senate File 127. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. We have another amendment. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would move second reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 127 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, this is really a bill that passed a couple of weeks ago. Wyoming's Tomorrow bill passed with 44 votes. So to keep this alive as we move forward into a special session, this amendment does not harm the current bill, keeps that bill, keeps the appropriation that you just passed, everything intact. And so, Mr. Speaker, really, if you have the amendment pulled up, it just starts at the bottom and inserts the Wyoming's Tomorrow Scholarship Program in this bill. And I could go through the amendment, I could go through the definitions, setting up the accounts, the administration, the qualifications, but you've already heard that and we've saw that sawdust already. So I'd stand for any questions, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any member, first time on the amendment, first time on the amendment, first time, second time, first time, Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I just would ask the bringer if I heard this correctly, really what we're asking to do here is to roll a bill that we passed and didn't make it on the other, I assume on the other side. And we're going to now amend that bill into this bill. That'd be my first question, Mr. Speaker.
So we're on first times. We're on first times. Any other member for their first time? First time, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I was joking with the bringer. I'm not going to call a rules committee. I'm not a hypocrite on germaneness, but I am going to urge a no vote on the amendment, which is that I don't think our state can afford this. I think we already have fiscal issues in the Hathaway. We've been through this many times. I was opposed to the bill, but I don't think this is a good amendment. And I do think, while germaneness issues aside, I don't think we should be doing this big of an amendment at the end. So I urge a no. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members? Madam Minority Floor Leader, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and in favor of the amendment. Friends, this bill that you have before you is a small modified version of the amendment. The amendment is far more thorough and does it better. The fact that it wasn't vetted thoroughly shouldn't stop us from doing what is right. If you remember what the amendment does, what the bill did, is acknowledge that we have a need for post-secondary education for adults, for those who are 25 or older. We need to give them the opportunity to be retrained and retooled, and we have the means to do it. Right? This bill does it, and again, it does it far better than the smaller bill that you have before you. So let's get it to, so it has a thorough hearing. And so I would urge you to vote aye on the amendment.
Any other members? First time. We're on first time, second reading, amendment number 3. First time. Representative Ottman, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just say that adult education is a wonderful thing. And I was a non-traditional student, so I most definitely believe in it. But when there's an amendment put into a bill And that bill's not passed by this body yet. And the amendment recreates something. I would want to be very careful. What I'm learning about education, and I know some, but what I am learning is that when we involve ourselves in certain things and set up a criteria, we do not allow the public to show the needs that they need and to get involved. For example, when we set up scholarships that go for primarily academic things rather than trades, the whole dynamic of education changes. And 20 years down the road, we're saying, where are all those workers? Where are all those workers? Now we have to recreate adult education to get people in there. So I would just say, let's take a break. Let's get part of it passed and see how it goes. Let the individual districts and different parts of the state do what they need to do. And so I would vote no on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members, first time? First time. Representatives Romero Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for. We keep making these gaps we say are not hypocritical, but really are because we keep cutting certain populations out. So before we use a word out of context, maybe we should just keep it in context and support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other members, first time? We're on first time. Representative Knapp.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I would like to call a point of order on this for the Rules Committee. The bill is titled as the Wyoming Learn While You Earn program and establishes that the rest of the bill goes along to form appropriations, et cetera. The other bill, while this body did pass it, I don't believe it belongs in this one. Thank you.
So your point of order, you'd like a Rules Committee to rule on the germaneness of this inclusion?
Correct.
All right, Rules Committee, let's meet at the front of the room.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Please, Representative Gray.
You know, I was wondering, maybe this is friendly, if we could talk, I think the original intent of the bill is a better, I mean, can we also talk about that? I'll call a point of order on the original intent of the bill, not germaneness.
You can call, the Rules Committee will consider everything and I'll make a determination, then you can
Great.
go from there. All right, members, thank you very much for your patience, members of the public. We had a Rules Committee. There was actually I'll recap. It was on germaneness and original intent of the amendment to the bill. And I appreciate the Rules Committee and the discussion we had and the objectors and their case they made. I'm going to rule that it is both germane and within the scope and original intent of the bill of expanding educational program opportunities. And certainly we know how this works. You're welcome to object to the ruling of the chair, and we can go through that. So we're going to continue with first time. If there's no objection, we're going to continue with first time on the amendment. First time on the amendment. Representative Sweeney. No.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So it was referenced that there's not the money in the Hathaway account. And every number that I have seen indicates just the opposite. That fund has continued to grow even with the usage. And so I think this is a tremendous program that we should be looking at for career technical education. And so I am on and in support of the amendment.
All right, members, we're still on first time. First time, Representative Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And in strong support of this amendment, we sat through the interim on this task force and heard over and over again the need to address this population of students that's out of, been out of high school a while and needs to get a leg up for training, worker training. And I just think it's a hole we're missing. And this, I don't believe in the question to the good bringers. I don't believe the money's in the bill, is in the amendment now. And so I think that would be a future appropriation, or hopefully some of the federal dollars. But this concept is a great concept. It's been well debated, well vetted, and I urge your support of the amendment.
Other members, first time. We're on first time, third reading amendment, or second reading amendment number 3. First time, seeing none. Second time, Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I want to point out two things. And one is that in this bill, we just put an appropriation of $1 million. And so even though we started it without an appropriation, now we're going to roll a second bill into this, and the second part does not have an appropriation. So I'm kind of curious of how long, maybe third reading, we'll get an appropriation for that. We'll continue to grow. And then I would say to the good representative from District 13, I believe it is, that I think maybe she made my point. We don't have to do this. We don't have to know exactly what this is. We did the bill here a while back and didn't make it. And so now we're going to come back and we're going to do this. And it's kind of almost a thing of, well, let's pass this and we'll find out what's in it. And so I just kind of hate to see us go down this road of putting bills into other bills. We've done it before. I've probably voted for it at some point. I've made my mistakes. And so I just no on the amendment, aye for the bill.
Thank you. Other members, Madam Minority Floor Leader Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am the representative from District 13. I believe the point that I made is we do within our rules, whatever we can to get the best possible legislation for the state. We do it carefully, we do it thoughtfully, and this is an example of it. We all do it when it's the right thing to do. We also just had a rules committee on it, and the ruling was that this is germane. It is part of the original intent of the bill, and we had that ruling, and now we're debating it. Switching gears here, we in Wyoming have had a phenomenal educational system. We know that. But in the 21st century, we need to change. And there's a recognition, unlike 10 or 15 years ago, that our post-secondary educational attainment is now lagging. Where we were one of the best in the nation, we're now getting towards the bottom. And by post-secondary educational attainment, we mean everything from a high-quality credential, and you can think in my mind, think something like a master plumber, right? All the way up through a university education, right? The bill as it exists right now, right, kind of targets those young adults, in order to get those kinds of credential. With the amendment, we go into that next hole that we know that we have, those who are 25 or older, who right now don't have access to, for example, the Hathaway, right? They don't, they're too old, right? We have after 2 years of meetings with industry and education, came up with this mechanism in order to support those students. This is a mechanism that has incredible potential for keeping young adults in the state and getting them retooled so that they can stay in our communities, they can work, and they can provide for their families. I would strongly urge an aye vote.
Thank you. Any other member for second time? Second time? Good Representative, I don't think you spoke the first time on this amendment, so my apologies. I got out of order with the video earlier because I overlooked a member, but thank you. Any other member for second time to the sponsor? Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and appreciate the good debate and couple things really. Just to be clear, there is no money in this bill. Just to be clear, there is no money in this bill. It does not affect the 1 million that you just approved an appropriation for the earn while you learn while you earn program. But it sets up the program, and I think I'm just looking at the action here on the floor today, all the amendments, all the great debate. We're still getting paid today. The game is still going. And we're going to work till the final minute of this thing. And there might be more opportunities for us to work and do some good here. So we're talking about over 200,000 people in our state with a high school diploma or less. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about changing family trees. Other states have done this. We're one of the last to do this. It's a really pragmatic approach. It works in other states. And I think we're going to be blessed. First of all, as we've said before, we're a very wealthy state. When we come together in July, we're going to have to decide really what are some projects for, because we're closer to 2070 than we are 1970. And how this thing's going to look. And so appreciate your support on this. And I'll just say too, the Hathaway Scholarship, I didn't see anybody bring bills to do away with that. Everybody thinks that's a great deal. Like the Permanent Trust Fund, it's one of those legacy things that long after we're pictures on the walls, it'll be benefiting our state. That was done on the final day in the second house, about 8:30 at night in a crowded little committee room in education, right at the end of the session. Similar path. The House had passed it, got defeated, and a perfect vehicle came through. And that's what we do. I'm still making my $150 a day. So I'm gonna work it to the end, just like the rest of you. So I appreciate all your thoughtful debate, and I appreciate your aye vote. And we can, when we get together in July, we can really see the sun come up in this state on really some big ideas. And I want us to think big, think about 2070 and how we move this state forward. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Members, we are voting on second reading, amendment number 3, Senate File 127. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Senate File 127, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 141.
Senate File 141, sponsored by Senator Perkins. Business entities, representation in detainer cases, an act related to civil procedure.
We do have an amendment. Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1.
Please proceed.
Thank you. We discussed this amendment previously about having a 50% ownership of the land and for the LLC. And think of this scenario, if you have more than one owner or more than one partner in an LLC, first of all, it may not be land. It should have been maybe a partnership. So I thought about bringing a different possibility of just the LLC partnership. However, if you've got multiple partners in a partnership or the LLC, you're not going to have necessarily 50%. So to make it fair for all those involved, it may be a family LLC, it may be a husband and wife, it may be a bunch of friends. So no one would ever be able to take advantage of this. So that's why we need to remove this, because it would be it wouldn't be usable. It would make this bill completely null and void. So on and for the amendment, please vote aye.
Thank you. Chairman Greer, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask for a no vote on this amendment. The reason that the amendment was brought on first reading, which was even asked for by the sponsor of this bill, doesn't say that you have to have 50% of the LLC or the members do. What it says is the business entity, the LLC itself, has to have a 50% interest in the property. So why was this bill brought? Okay, it was brought as a constituent bill by one of my dear friends in the other chamber. And it was so that mom and pop, we use that term a lot, but husband and wife have an LLC. They've got 12 rental apartments. They're using that. That's part of their retirement, it's been their investment. And so that they do this day to day. They're managing their property. And so for them to be able to engage in what is in essence an evictions, we call forcible entry and detainer. And the reason why this amendment was brought was so that management companies, okay, couldn't engage in the practice of law. What it was is that mom and dad, mom and pop, husband and wife that own an LLC have the ability and have the access to the court, just like they would as individuals, but for the fact that their property is in an LLC. If we don't have this safeguard, then that opens up a layer where management companies can come in and practice law on behalf of the other folks. So that's why the amendment was there. I think it's a good safeguard. So I'm against this amendment, leave the other amendment in there, and do think long and hard about voting for this bill in the end. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Any further discussion? Representative Craigo, first time on amendment number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with the intent of the original amendment, but I'm not sure that it accomplishes that particular goal. I just read it differently than the real country lawyer. And so I would urge an aye vote on this amendment. Maybe we can tackle that back on third reading. Thank you.
Any other member, real or imagined? Any other member? Any other member for their first time, second time? Second time to the sponsor. It's like a standoff in the back of the house. All right, members, we're voting on second reading, amendment number 1, Senate File 141. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. We have another amendment. Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 141 and ask for your favorable consideration.
Members, as you probably gathered yesterday, this isn't really my favorite bill. And so this is my attempt to make the bill a little bit better. And it really alleviates the concerns, or attempts to alleviate some of the concerns, I guess, that I had yesterday regarding what this bill allows owners of a company to do. Under the current language of the bill, one owner, let's say we go back to the scenario I talked about yesterday where we have 10 owners of an LLC. Under this bill, one of the owners, without the approval of any of the other owners, could just run in, practice law, and represent their company in a proceeding. What my amendment does is simply require all the owners of that particular company to consent or agree to one of the other owners being their quote unquote lawyer for the day. And so I would ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Discussion, Representative Duncan on the amendment number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the standoff continues, I concur and I encourage an aye vote.
Any other member? Any other member? First time on the amendment. First time, second time, done. Members, we're voting on second reading, amendment number 2, Senate File 141. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Senate File 141, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 152.
Senate File 152, sponsored by Senator Dockstader, connection of utility services, an act relating to cities, towns, and counties.
Senate File 152, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. All right, so members, and this was noticed, I mean, I gave you heads up in the last, couple of days, where our best effort is to try to get all of our bills, third readings finished today. And I'll just be candid with you. We've got members that are going to be away next week with take care of health issues with their families. We've, of course, have a member who's probably going to be attending to family matters. The northeast part of the state may be unable to attend. So we start losing members next week. And my hope and my goal is to have as many members to do as robust a discussions as we can. So there's going to be a motion to suspend the rules to accelerate the bills we just completed on second reading to third reading and complete those today. You will have the opportunity to object to one of those bills. I'm going to ask you respectfully not to object. Our intent is majority floor to the chief clerk and working with our colleagues down the hall, they are doing the same thing, is to give you plenty of time this day to develop amendments for the bills that we're going to accelerate. Because there's no question in my mind, we already have amendments for some of those bills. So we're going to take up these, if this motion carries, then we'll take up these bills. And by the way, this is a 2/3 motion because it's a suspension of our rules, 2/3 vote. So we will do our regular third reading. We'll go to concurrences. We'll do joint conference committee reports. We'll probably sign enrolled acts so we can get them downstairs. We'll take messages, and toward the later part of hopefully not a long day, our day, we'll take up these second readings. So you'll have that time to take up to develop amendments for this accelerated third reading. So with that, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Please, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I understand the intent of this. I just want to understand, is there any chance that we could do either 2 consent lists or not have the second reading ones on consent? Because then we're coming back right away after lunch and doing the second reading ones. So, I mean, is there any chance we could do 2 consent lists if we want to do the second reading ones, some of them on consent? Does that make sense?
Thank you, Representative Gray. So we'd have to suspend another rule if we wanted a consent list on these ones that we're accelerating. And that's fine. We could double the motion, so we could also have a consent list on the accelerated bills as well. But that's a,
Oh, so, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Go ahead, Representative
Thank you,
Gray.
Mr. Speaker. So these bills we're accelerating will not be on consent.
They will not be on the
Oh, that's
consent
great.
list.
Thank you.
They will they will be regular third reading, but it'll be a part 2 regular third reading, and it'll be later in the day when when we get to a point where I feel, and I feel, but hopefully everybody will be able to get their amendments and their considerations to the LSO staff. So is everybody clear? Everybody clear process wise of where we are? And thank you, Representative Gray, for the inquiry. There will not be a consent on these accelerated bills. All right, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Rule 7-1, I move to suspend the rules requiring readings on 3 separate days so that the following bills may be immediately considered on third reading and final passage. Senate File 38, Senate File 68, Senate File 76, Senate File 112, Senate File 121, Senate File 122, Senate File 127, Senate File 141, and Senate File 152.
Members, that motion is in order. House Rule 7-1 allows the motion to suspend the rules so bills could be heard second reading, or you can hear bills on the same 2 readings on the same day. Does any member object to an inclusion of any of the bills listed? Any member? Seeing no objection, the motion to suspend rules is that being the following bills will be considered immediately on third reading and final passage. It's Senate File 38, 68, 76, 112, 121, 122, 127, 141, 152. The motion requires the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the elected members. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt.
Aye.
Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner.
Aye.
Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman excused. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters.
Aye.
Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 58 aye, 1 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to suspend the rules, and we will proceed to third reading and final passage on the bills with an individual roll call vote on each bill and amendments at a point later in our day. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, what I'm hoping we do today, we're going to take a 1-hour lunch, so I'll make that motion in a minute. And then it's my hope, it will just all depending on how it goes, it's my hope we get out of here by 4. So, if there's the work's going to continue, right? There are going to be concurrences coming and stuff. We're going to have to do some of that later, but I would hope we could. That remains to be seen. But so, Mr. Speaker, I move the House stand in recess until 1 p.m.
All right, members, any announcements? Any announcements? Any announcements? So I'm going to have three announcements. First, there are bill signings today. So let's at least be cautious that we maintain a quorum on the floor. I know many of you have constituents for bills that were important to you and to them coming to town. So, but let's still try to maintain a quorum on the floor. The Speaker Pro Tem is available. He'll be actually taking care of third reading and some of those duties. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you will be receiving a letter on behalf of the president and myself regarding our interim and how we foresee interim committees being conducted. And an expectation, I'm just going to be quite candid with you, the expectation is members will attend interim committees in person. So we're trying to go back to regular business unless there is the chairman will have the discretion. If there's a member that is ill due to the public health issues we have, that's one thing. But otherwise, we're going to try to do our best to go back to regular order of business. However, we're also going to give the public an opportunity to participate remotely. So it's kind of a compromise, but I think we all understand the quality of the work when we're all in the same room, visiting with each other and discussing the issues is a lot better. The final thing that you'll also get, I think maybe in a separate letter from the president and myself, will be the expectation of a special session and in consultation with the executive branch. I think the most likely timeline puts that somewhere between the Independence Day holiday and Frontier Days, Cheyenne Frontier Days. So that Monday, the 12th, maybe that week is kind of where we have of July, Monday, the 12th July and that week. So that's kind of just a heads up, both for the members of our body and the public about kind of a couple of the expectations that I think we're hopeful we can fulfill during our interim. So with that, you've heard the majority floor leader's motion. All those in favor of recessing for lunch until 1 p.m., please say aye. Those opposed, no. We are in recess until 1 p.m. Thank you.